Welcome to the Parsha Shir this week for Parshat Mishpatim. This week's Shir is sponsored by Aaron and Lillian Fuchs and Jason Fuchs in memory of Aaron's sister and Jason's aunt, Shendel Gutman, Shendel Gittel, Bas Reb Chaim Shol, Aleh Shalom, whose yahrzeit is on the 11th of Shvat. May her neshama have an aliyah, and may we all be zeicher to see Tchias HaMesim. Parshat Mishpatim begins with the posuk Ve'ele HaMishpatim Asher Tosim Lifneihem. And these are the rules, the laws, that you shall set before them. God instructed Moshe to lay out the basic list of civil laws that would govern the lives of the Jewish people going forward. Rashi addresses the curious wording in this pasuk, Asher Tosim Lifneihem, that you shall set before them. What exactly does this phrase mean? Rashi explains it as follows, based on a medrash. God said to Moshe, don't let it enter your mind to say, I shall teach them a section of the Torah or a single halacha merely twice or three times until it becomes familiar to them. In other words, they'll know the words, but I won't take the trouble to make them understand the reason of each thing and its significance. That's no good, God said to Moshe. That's not at all what I want. And that is what it means when it says, Asher Tosim Lifneihem, that you shall set before them. Keshulchan aruch umuchan le'echel livnei adam. It needs to be set before the Jewish people like a fully laid table, ready for someone to begin a meal, with everything ready for eating. By the way, that medrash, this Rashi, is where Rav Yosef Karo got the idea from to call his comprehensive halacha book Shulchan Aruch. The whole idea was that the Shulchan Aruch is a one-stop shop containing everything that a Jew needs to observe halacha. He or she doesn't need to go and look anywhere else, as the Mechaber explains in his introduction. The Dorish Mordechai asks a very good question. Ad heichon magia chayvosoi shel harav lelamed es talmidov b'safa berua sheyisyashvu hadvorim al liboisam. How far does a Rebbe have to go when teaching Torah to his students to ensure that they have mastered the topic that's being taught? Unsurprisingly, he quotes the Gemara in Eruvin, Nun Daled Amud Beis. Rabbi Preda havale hahu talmida davatonale arba me'ozimni v'gomar. Rabbi Preda had a certain student whom he would have to teach 400 times because it took him that many times to learn the material and know it properly, as he was apparently incapable of understanding it otherwise. By the way, Rabbi Preda is not mentioned very often in the Gemara. We know that he lived to a very advanced age and that he was from the third generation of Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael, a contemporary of Rabbi Ami. In Maseches Megillah, Daf Chof Zayin Amud Beis, there's a story about Rabbi Preda's students asking him why he had merited to live such a long life, longer than anyone else. He answered them that he had always been careful about three things. He was always the first in the Beis Medrash. He always made sure to ask a kohen to do the zimun before Birkas HaMazon. And he never ate meat from an animal that had not had the designated parts given as the tithe to the priests, to the kohanim. But whatever his own views were on his incredible longevity, surely Rabbi Preda's greatest virtue was his extraordinary patience when teaching his students, and the real explanation for his long life, and particularly this student who needed to go over the material 400 times before he understood it. The Gemara relates that on one occasion, when he was teaching this student, they requested Rabbi Preda's presence for something important, a mitzvah that he needed to do straight after he'd finished teaching. Rabbi Preda consented to attend, whatever it was, and then went ahead and taught his student 400 times, as usual. But on this occasion, the student still hadn't got it after the 400 times. Rabbi Preda said to his student, my dear boy, what's going on? Why aren't you getting it? What's the difference today? The student blushed. I'm sorry, he said. but as soon as they asked you to go somewhere after the lesson, I was distracted, thinking to myself that you're going any minute and I won't be able to get what you're teaching me because you're leaving. What did Rabbi Preda do? Do you know what he did? Amazing. Rabbi Preda said to his student, forget everything else, just pay attention to me and I will teach you, and don't worry, I will not leave you until you have fully mastered what I am teaching. And guess what? He taught it to him again another 400 times. When he finished teaching his student the second 400 times and the student finally understood, now after hearing it 800 times, a baskol, a divine voice, spoke out and said to Rabbi Preda, what would you prefer as a reward for this incredible thing that you did for your student? Would you prefer to have 400 years to be added to your life? Or would you prefer that you and the rest of your generation merit a guaranteed spot in the world to come, in Olam Haba? Well, without hesitation, Rabbi Preda said, I prefer that I and my generation merit a guaranteed spot in the world to come. To which God responded by addressing the angels in heaven. Give him both, he said. Rabbi Preda shall live a very long life, and he and the rest of his generation will merit a guaranteed spot in the world to come. The Darash Mordechai is totally mystified by this story. He asks a very pertinent question. Why wasn't Rabbi Preda given a reward for the fact that he went over whatever he was teaching his student each and every day 400 times? I mean, who does that? Why was it only when he did it 400 times the second time that God stepped in and offered him the rewards? The Darash Mordechai quotes his Mechutin, Rav Shmuel Trovitz, to answer the question. Rav Trovitz, Zichrono Livracha, was the rabbi of the Kiryat Kalev neighborhood in Rishon LeZion. He founded the Knesset Meir Yeshiva, and he was the author of the Sefer Madani Shmuel. You can find his shiurim on Kol HaLoshen. Rav Trovitz has a beautiful answer to the question on this story about Rabbi Preda, based on the Rashi that I mentioned earlier. It's simple, he says. You need to teach your student as many times as he needs until it is like a Shulchan Aruch, a fully laid table, ready for someone to begin a meal with everything ready for eating. If it takes 5 or 10 times, that's great. If it takes 50, so be it. And if it takes 400, you've got to do it 400 times. Because that's your job. That's what God instructed Moshe Rabbeinu. And he was the first teacher. He was Rabbeinu for the Jewish people. And the point is, God is not going to hand out extraordinary rewards for doing your job. But if the student is at fault for not knowing the material because he or she is distracted by their own fault, nothing to do with the teacher, and the teacher still goes the extra mile, and in Rabbi Preda's case that meant another 400 times, that is truly worthy of reward, which was why God offered Rabbi Preda those rewards. But the Darash Mordechai is not yet satisfied. Okay, Rabbi Preda was extraordinary, and that's why he got that reward. But what about the other people of his generation? What had they done to deserve a guaranteed spot in the world to come? In order to merit such an incredible reward, you need to do something, surely. Make an effort. Put yourself out. What had they done? Nothing. They had done nothing, and yet they were promised a guaranteed place in Olam Haba. What's going on? The Darash Mordechai quotes the Chidushei HaRim to answer this question. The Chidushei HaRim notes that Chazal tell us that Misas Tzadikim Mechaperes, the passing of great tzaddikim, is a kapara, an absolution, a way of gaining clemency for the people who are left behind. Why should that be the case? What have the people left behind after the tzaddik's passing done to deserve clemency for their sins? They're sitting at home, minding their own business, going about their daily lives, and suddenly they hear an announcement that some great rabbi has died thousands of miles away. Nothing has changed for them in any practical sense, and yet they are forgiven for their sins. Why? It seems ridiculous. But it's not ridiculous, says the Chidushei Harim. All their lives, these great tzaddikim led exemplary lives, but the actual details of their lives are not known. Neither their incredible devotion, nor their astonishing piety. Yes, it might have been known to a few people around them, but most people are totally unaware. Suddenly, they arrive in heaven, in Shamayim, and there is an outpouring of rachamim, of mercy, as a result of all their zechusim, all of their merits, a reflection of an entire life filled with goodness and virtue. And that rachamim is abundant, so much so that it flows everywhere, even for people who themselves are not worthy of it. That is what happened with Rabbi Preda. His extraordinary act of kindness to teach that student another 400 times triggered an abundant outpouring of reward credits, so much so that not only he received a reward, but everyone else in his generation got in on the act as well. The Darash Mordcha has another explanation for Rashi's characterization of Asher Tosim Lifnehem as a Shulchan Aruch. He recalls a story he once heard about Rav Avraham Mordcha Alter, the Ger Rebbe known as the Imre Emes, Zechet Tzadik Livracha. One of his Hasidim, one of his followers, came to ask him for his advice about his efforts to study Torah. He told the Imre Emes, I learn Torah all the time, but I can't remember it. It just slips from my mind. I go to a shir, and the next day someone asks me, what did you learn in the shir? I was listening intently, but as hard as I try to remember what the Maggid Shir said in the shir, I can't remember. It's totally slipped out of my head, my mind. Please, Rebbe, advise me what to do. Please help me. The Imre Emes looked at his chosid with a piercing gaze. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, La'olam lo eshkach pikudecha kivam chiyisoni. I will never forget your precepts, because they keep me alive. Do you know why King David never forgot the Torah he studied, said the Imre Emes? Kivam chiyisoni. Because the Torah was his oxygen. Without it, he would have died. Tell me, he asked, has it ever happened that you forgot, and by mistake you tried to put food in your nose or your ears instead of putting it in your mouth? No? I didn't think so. Do you know why you didn't make that mistake? Kivam chiyisoni. Because you need food to live. And if you put food in your nose or in your ears, after a very short time, you would die of starvation. Things that you need to live, you never forget what to do. That's why David HaMelech never forgot his Torah. Kivam chiyisoni. And that's why the Medrash quoted by Rashi uses the analogy of a Shulchan Aruch, a fully laid table, ready for someone to begin a meal, with everything ready for eating. Everyone at such a table knows exactly what to do. They don't need an instruction manual. You don't need any directions. The laid table speaks for itself. You can start eating, and that's what you do. The same thing is with Torah. It needs to be a Shulchan Aruch, Kivam chiyisoni. It's food for your soul. And when something is food for your soul, you make sure that it is a Shulchan Aruch in your life. Let's turn now to the first mitzvah of the Mishpatim contained in Parshat Mishpatim. It is the mitzvah of Eved Ivri, an indentured servant. Ki sikne Eved Ivri, sheish shonim ta'avoid, uvashvi'is yetze lachofshi chinam. When you buy an indentured servant, he should work for you for 6 years, and in the 7th he should go free. The Torah is talking about a Jewish person who becomes a servant to another Jew. There are two ways for a man to become such a servant, an Eved Ivri. The first is if he stole money or items from someone but cannot repay his victim after he is caught and found guilty. In such a situation, the Beis Din, the Jewish court, can order for him to be, quote-unquote, sold into the status of Eved Ivri, a Jewish servant. The proceeds of the sale are then used to repay the victim of his theft. The second way you can become an Eved Ivri is if you are having trouble making ends meet, you can't pay your bills, your creditors are running after you, you have the option as a last resort of selling yourself into the status of Eved Ivri. The maximum time of such indentured servantry is 6 years, or until the Yovel, which could interrupt the 6-year period. Many of the commentaries are bemused by the fact that of all the mitzvahs that God could have chosen to start off the parsha dealing with civil laws, he decided to choose the laws of Eved Ivri. Surely there are other less obscure laws relating to civil matters that could have kicked off this aspect of the mitzvahs we have to observe. The laws of business, for example, or the laws of damages, or the laws relating to murder and manslaughter. Why choose this very unusual mitzvah to headline all of the Mishpatim? It's odd, to say the least, don't you agree? Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, the founder of the 19th century Mussar movement, offers a compelling explanation. It's an explanation that will resonate with every parent. Every family with children has some children that follow the regular patterns of behaviour, while others deviate from the norms and wander off the beaten track. A parent faced with a wayward child will obviously focus as much attention as possible to get that child back on the straight and narrow. And imagine one of those children is resorting to criminal-type behaviour or becoming a miscreant in some other way, despised by others for their antisocial conduct. You, as a loving parent, will do whatever you can to change the narrative. You will shower them with your love, sometimes acting tough, other times just giving abundant love, always trying to corral that child back into line. There is no parent who loves their child who will reject that child even when they do something that society considers wrong. Love trumps everything. A parent is always there for their child. That's the way it should be. That is the lesson the Torah is teaching us here, says Rabbi Yisrael Salanta. One of God's children has become a thief. God doesn't shove him down to the bottom of his list of concerns. On the contrary, there he is, the thief, the guy who can't pay back his debts, the outcast, at the top of the list. Number one, we need to reintegrate him into society, into the community, into the family. We bring him into our home. We show him love. We show him how to behave, what it means to be part of a family. In fact, the Torah is quite clear. We must favour the Eved Ivri. We must show him that he has value, despite his misbehaviour. We must be ready to give him the good bed, the good pillow, to have him eat our meals with us, to give him the good food. As long as he is doing his part and pulling his weight, he must become a treasured member of the household, valued for what he can become in the future, not discredited and cast out for what he has done in the past. There are so many rules about treating the Eved Ivri with respect, preserving and even elevating his dignity. And you know what the lesson is here. Everyone, even those who you might think are outcasts, everyone is worthy of respect and must be treated with dignity. And that's why this is the first mitzvah of all the civil laws given to the Jewish people. We think that ordinary people can be treated ordinary, and it's just the elevated people who have to be given the red carpet treatment. But by the way, who decides who is ordinary? Your perception? What do you even know? Your eyes can and do deceive you. There is a well-known story about Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin from the time when he was the Rav of Brisk before he moved to Jerusalem. He was once traveling out of town and there was a terrible rainstorm and he was in the rain, he was getting drenched, and although he wasn't going to stop in that particular place and he hadn't made any arrangements, he went to the local Jewish inn where visitors from out of town could come and stay. He knocked on the door, and at first the guy, the innkeeper, didn't even answer the door. Eventually he came to the door and he looked at Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, drenched and bedraggled, standing there in front of him. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly. Bear in mind, Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin was one of the greatest rabbis living in Europe at the time, renowned for his scholarship and piety, whose advice was sought by every rabbi and lay leader out there. But on the doorstep of this inn, he looked like an ordinary Jewish traveller, very wet, down on his luck, trying to get out of the downpour. "We've got no room here," the innkeeper said. "Please," Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin said, "I can't stay outside, it's cold and wet." The innkeeper scowled. "Okay, I guess you can sleep on the floor in the laundry room," he grunted. Rab Diskin tried to make the best of it and kept out of the innkeeper's way. A short time later there was a commotion at the door. The Kohen of a Rebbe had arrived with a large entourage, like Hasidic Rebbes do. The innkeeper opened the door with a big smile and a hearty Shalom Aleichem. No task was too insignificant or great, as he did everything he could to accommodate the Rebbe and his entourage. He fed them, he unpacked their luggage, he hovered over them trying to anticipate anything that they might need. Suddenly, the Kohen of a Rebbe noticed a fellow sitting on the floor in the laundry room. He squinted and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "Aren't you the Brisker Rav, Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin?" he asked. They'd met before, but he couldn't believe that this great rabbi was sitting like a schnorrer on the floor. The Kohen of a Rebbe turned to the innkeeper. "What have you done? Do you know that this person, this man, is literally one of the greatest rabbis of our time? Why is he on the floor? Have you lost your mind?" The innkeeper's mouth dropped open and he went as white as a sheet. "I had no idea," he stammered. "I thought he was just a regular person." "What are you talking about?" the Rebbe said. And he made place at the table for the Brisker Rav to sit next to him. "I'm so sorry," the innkeeper said to Rav Diskin. "Please forgive me. I never meant to insult you." Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin thought for a moment. "I'll forgive you," he said, "but there's a condition." "Sure, I'll do anything, whatever you ask." "Simple," said Rav Diskin. "I want you to come to my house and be my guest for 2 weeks. The innkeeper looked at him. "What? What do you mean?" "You heard me. Come to me for 2 weeks and all is forgiven." A few weeks later, this innkeeper, this ordinary Jew, came to stay with Rav Diskin at his home in Brisk, and he stayed with him for 2 weeks. And guess what? Rav Diskin treated him like a king, like royalty. He lavished him with every comfort imaginable. He served him personally. He took care of him, because there is no such thing as royalty or not royalty when it comes to taking care of others. Everyone is worthy of the utmost attention. Whether you are Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, or the Kohen of a Rebbe, or an innkeeper, or even an Eved Ivri, you are a brother, you are a sister, you are a prince, you are a princess. That is the way it should be. And that's why Eved Ivri is the first mitzvah in Parshat Mishpatim, because that's the lesson we all need to learn, even before we start looking at civil laws and the rules of how we conduct our lives. That's it. Thank you so much for watching or for listening, and I look forward to you joining me next time. Thank you. Thank you.